The billionaire CEO stood beside her disabled black sedan, staring at the battered pickup that had just pulled onto the shoulder. "I can call someone," she said, holding up her phone even though the screen showed no service. The driver, a single dad in a faded work jacket, glanced at the darkening road and then at the school backpack on his passenger seat. "You can," he said calmly, "but I have to pick up my daughter in 25 minutes. If you want a ride, I can get you somewhere safe on the way." Claire Whitmore was accustomed to people rearranging their lives when she spoke. This man was offering help without rearranging his. For reasons she could not explain, she opened the passenger door. His name was Ethan Cole. The pickup smelled faintly of coffee, sawdust, and the strawberry shampoo from a child's jacket folded behind the seat. Claire moved the backpack between them and noticed a handwritten note clipped to the zipper. "Dad, don't forget 5:30. She almost smiled. "Important meeting? School science night." Ethan checked the dashboard clock. "She built a bridge out of popsicle sticks. Apparently civilization depends on me seeing it." 5 miles later, traffic stopped behind an overturned delivery trailer blocking one lane. Drivers leaned on horns. A man in a company polo stepped into the road waving everyone backward without much success. Claire reached for her phone again. "We'll be here forever." Ethan studied the shoulder, the drainage ditch, and the line of vehicles. Then he got out. He did not shout. He moved 3 orange cones, asked 2 drivers to hold their positions, and guided a farm truck backward just enough to open a narrow passage for smaller vehicles. Within minutes, traffic began moving one direction at a time. The company man looked surprised. "You work highway crews?" Ethan climbed back into his pickup. "No." "Then how did you know what to do?" "Someone had to stop everybody from solving the same problem differently." Claire looked at him more carefully after that. At a roadside diner, Ethan pulled in because his daughter had texted that her teacher was running late. He offered Claire coffee while they waited for a tow company to call. Back at the counter, a waitress recognized him. "Still driving that old thing?" "Still starts." "Mostly." She laughed, then quietly slipped a slice of pie into a paper bag. "For Sophie." Ethan tried to pay. She pushed his money back. "You fixed my porch railing last month. That took 10 minutes. And saved me a carpenter." Claire watched the exchange. Nobody seemed impressed by Ethan, yet everyone seemed to trust him. When the tow dispatcher finally called, he said Claire's car could not be recovered until morning. Her executive assistant immediately offered to send a company driver from the city. Ethan checked the time. "That'll put you here another 2 hours." Claire looked toward the rain beginning against the diner window. "And your daughter?" "Still waiting for me." He stood. "I can take you home after science night if you don't mind a detour." Claire almost refused. No one had ever invited her into a family obligation as casually as if she were simply another person needing a ride. At the elementary school, Sophie ran down the hallway carrying a cardboard bridge and stopped when she saw Claire. "Dad, who's she?" Ethan took the project carefully from his daughter's hands. "Someone whose car had a bad day." Sophie considered that, then handed Claire one end of the bridge. "Can you hold this? Dad always carries too much." Claire did. 10 minutes later, she watched Ethan kneel beside a table while Sophie explained load distribution with the seriousness of an engineer. When one support cracked, Ethan did not fix it for her. He asked where she thought the weight was going. Sophie moved one brace, tested it again, and the bridge held. Claire stared at father and daughter, suddenly understanding that his calm on the highway had not been luck. It was how he moved through everything. On the ride afterward, she finally asked, "What do you actually do for work?" Ethan kept his eyes on the road. "Facilities maintenance." Claire frowned. A man who could organize traffic, repair homes, and teach structural thinking without taking over was changing light fixtures for a living. "Why?" she asked. Ethan glanced at the backpack between them, then at the clock. "Because the shift ends at 4. And something about that answer stayed with Claire long after the pickup turned toward her neighborhood. Claire thought about Ethan's answer the next morning while sitting behind a polished conference table 30 floors above the city. Around her, department heads argued over a facilities problem at one of the company's older distribution centers. A loading corridor kept backing up during shift changes, causing overtime, damaged carts, and missed deliveries. 3 consultants had already proposed expensive redesigns. Claire looked at the floor plan, then remembered Ethan calmly opening a path through stalled traffic. "Has anyone asked the maintenance crew?" she said. The room went quiet. Her operations director frowned. Maintenance. They used the corridor every day. 2 hours later, Claire found herself at the distribution center, where Ethan was replacing a damaged door closer beside the loading bay. He looked surprised to see her. "Car trouble again?" "Not today." She handed him the floor plan. "Tell me what's wrong with this." Ethan studied it for less than a minute, then walked the corridor instead of answering. Sophie's school photo was tucked inside the clear cover of his tool cart, beside a handwritten grocery list and a reminder for Friday pickup. Claire followed as he watched forklifts, janitorial carts, and warehouse employees cross the same narrow intersection. "The hallway isn't the problem," he finally said. "The schedules are." He pointed toward 2 doors. "Shipping changes crews at the same time custodial brings equipment through. Move one break by 15 minutes and reverse this cart route." The operations director, who had joined them, gave a skeptical laugh. "We paid engineers to study this for 6 weeks. Ethan folded the plan. "Then they probably know more than I do." He returned to the door closer. Claire ignored the remark and asked the shift supervisor to test Ethan's idea. By lunch, the backup had disappeared. No construcción. No new equipment. Just a schedule change and 2 painted floor markers. "Who came up with this?" the supervisor asked. Claire looked toward Ethan, but he was already helping an older warehouse employee repair a loose wheel on her cart. "He did," Claire said. The operations director's expression tightened. "He's maintenance, Claire. Let's not turn one lucky observation into a promotion." Ethan heard him. His face did not change. At 4 o'clock, he cleaned his tools and headed for the employee exit. The director stopped him. "We're testing another layout tonight. Stay an extra 2 hours and walk us through it." Ethan checked his phone. A message from Sophie showed a grocery store list beneath a picture of an empty milk carton. "Can't tonight. Overtime's authorized." "I appreciate it. Then what's the problem?" Ethan zipped his work jacket. "My daughter needs groceries, and I told her I'd cook." The director shook his head as Ethan walked away. "That's why some people stay exactly where they are." Claire followed him into the parking lot. "Does that bother you?" Ethan unlocked his pickup. "Only if Sophie starts thinking keeping your word means less than getting ahead." Before Claire could answer, Sophie called. Ethan put the phone on speaker while loading his toolbox. "Dad, Mrs. Perez's kitchen sink is leaking again." Ethan sighed softly. "Did she shut the valve?" "She can't reach it." 10 minutes later, Claire found herself riding along as Ethan stopped at a small apartment building before the grocery store. He fixed the valve, tightened the supply line, refused payment, then still reached the supermarket before Sophie's cereal aisle closed for restocking. On the drive back, Claire noticed an old laminated badge partly hidden beneath the pickup's registration papers. She pulled it free before realizing the title printed beneath Ethan's photograph. Regional Operations Manager. Ethan quietly took it from her and slid it back into the glove box. "That was another life," he said. Claire looked at the man everyone at work called maintenance and suddenly understood she had been asking the wrong question. It was no longer whether Ethan was capable of more. It was why a man who had already been more had deliberately stepped away. Claire did not mention the old badge the next morning, but she watched Ethan differently. At the distribution center, a shipment control problem had spread from 1 dock to 3. A software update had duplicated several delivery windows, leaving trucks stacked outside the gates and warehouse crews working from conflicting schedules. The operations director blamed the system vendor. The shift supervisor blamed dispatch. Ethan stood near a maintenance cart, listening while everyone talked past one another. Claire finally turned to him. "What do you see?" The director exhaled sharply. "We're asking maintenance now?" Ethan ignored the tone and walked to the dock board. He compared printed manifests, driver arrival times, and the handwritten notes taped beside the scanner station. The software isn't the whole problem, he said. These teams are following two different cutoff times. He pointed to the evening schedule. Dispatch changed this last month. Receiving never did. The supervisor checked the logs. Ethan was right. The director frowned. That still doesn't clear 30 trucks. Ethan looked through the glass doors at the line outside. Not all at once. He separated the loads by refrigeration need, unloading time, and driver hours, then asked the dock leads to release the fastest turnaround trucks first. He moved perishables into the nearest open bays and delayed non-critical freight that could legally wait. 40 minutes later, the line was moving. 2 hours later, the backup was gone. One trucker shook Ethan's hand on the way out. You running this place now? Ethan smiled. Just fixing what was in front of me. Claire saw the operations director hear that. Instead of respect, his expression hardened. He got lucky twice, he said later in her office. And you're encouraging it. He solved the problem. He also leaves at 4 every day. His shift ends at 4. Leaders stay when the work needs them. Claire thought of the badge in Ethan's glove box. Maybe some leaders know when staying costs too much. That afternoon, Sophie arrived at the employee entrance carrying a poster board and a library book. Her after-school program had closed early because of a plumbing issue. Ethan signed her in with security, found her a chair beside the break room, and set out crackers. From his lunch bag, homework first. Sophie looked toward Claire, who had come downstairs. He says that like he didn't already help me with half of it last night. Ethan gave her a look. I helped you understand it. Same thing when you're 10. Claire laughed. A few minutes later, an older employee approached Ethan with a damaged rolling cart. One wheel had locked, and replacement parts would not arrive until next week. Ethan removed the wheel assembly, swapped a compatible bearing from an unused cart, and had it working before the employee finished her coffee. Put in the repair ticket anyway, he said. They need the record. Claire noticed what he did every time. Fix the problem, protect the process, take no credit. Sophie noticed Claire watching. Dad used to have meetings all day, she said quietly. Ethan looked up. Sophie. What? She already knows about the badge. Claire turned to him. Used to. Sophie lowered her voice. He had people who worked for him. Lots of them. Ethan packed away his tools. That was before. Before Claire could ask what changed, the operations director appeared holding a printed incident report from the dock crisis. He had listed Ethan's actions as unauthorized interference and recommended closed the file. I'm protecting the truth. That afternoon, a conveyor motor failed inside the distribution center's oldest sorting line. Maintenance crews prepared to replace the motor, but Ethan crouched beside the housing and listened before anyone disconnected it. Motor's fine, he said. The operations director folded his arms. Diagnostics say overload. Ethan removed a side panel and pointed to a misaligned bearing assembly heating against the shaft. Replace the motor and this eats the new one too. The maintenance supervisor checked the alignment, then quietly nodded. Ethan showed the crew how to reset the mount and replace the bearing without shutting down the entire line. 90 minutes later, sorting resumed. The operations director said nothing, but the maintenance supervisor shook Ethan's hand. You ever run facilities somewhere bigger than this? Ethan glanced at Claire, then returned his wrench to the cart. A while back. At 4, Sophie appeared at the employee entrance with 2 paper cups from the diner and a folded permission slip. Field trip, she announced. Ethan read it carefully. The class needed parent volunteers for a Friday museum visit. Sophie tried to sound casual. You don't have to go. Mrs. Bennett's mom said she could watch me. Ethan checked the date, then looked toward the overtime board where his name had been added for Friday. I told you I'd go when they announced it. But work knew my shift before they wrote that board. Claire heard the exchange. The next morning, she removed Ethan from mandatory overtime and replaced the policy with voluntary sign-ups for employees whose regular shifts had ended. Her operations director confronted her again. You're changing procedure because of one maintenance man. I'm changing a bad procedure because one maintenance man made me notice it. Ethan later found her beside the loading bay. You didn't have to do that for me. I didn't. Claire looked around at employees checking the new schedule. I did it because you were right. Something softened between them. Not gratitude. Trust. Later, Sophie invited Claire to help choose photos for her science night scrapbook. At the kitchen table, Claire noticed an old framed certificate half hidden behind a stack of school papers. It recognized Ethan for leading a regional emergency response team through a major warehouse shutdown years earlier. Beneath it lay a photograph of him in a suit, standing before dozens of employees. You weren't just an operations manager, Claire said. Ethan quietly turned the photograph face down. Sophie looked from him to Claire. Dad got offered an even bigger job after that. Ethan's expression tightened. Sophie, you didn't take it. Claire waited until the girl left to wash her hands. Why? Ethan looked toward the hallway where Sophie had disappeared. Because sometimes the promotion isn't what changes your life. Sometimes it's what happens while you're gone. Before Claire could ask more, her phone buzzed with a message from corporate leadership. The doc review had cleared Ethan of misconduct and praised his judgment, but headquarters now wanted Claire to identify him for a newly created operations role. She looked at Ethan, then at Sophie's field trip permission slip on the table. For the first time, opportunity and danger seemed to be arriving in the same envelope. Claire did not tell Ethan about the new operations role immediately. Instead, she asked him to spend one morning observing a problem at the company's busiest regional warehouse, where damaged orders had climbed for 3 straight weeks. Ethan agreed only after checking the schedule. I'm back here by 4? Before 4, Claire said. Her operations director heard the exchange and frowned. We're sending a maintenance employee to audit another facility now? Claire handed him the damage report. We're asking the person who keeps finding what everyone else misses. At the warehouse, managers blamed careless loaders, aging equipment, and rush drivers. Ethan watched quietly. He followed one pallet from receiving to storage, then another from storage to shipping. After 40 minutes, he asked for a roll of blue floor tape. Your crews aren't careless, he said. They're crossing paths. 2 forklift routes intersected beside a blind corner because an old storage zone had been moved months earlier without changing the traffic pattern. Ethan redirected one route, shifted a staging area 12 feet, and moved the morning break by 10 minutes to reduce congestion. The warehouse manager looked doubtful. That's your solution? Test it before you believe it. They did. By lunch, damaged cartons had dropped to nearly 0, and loading times improved without adding workers. More important to Ethan, nobody had been told to move faster. The warehouse manager shook his hand. You should be running one of these buildings. Ethan only asked where they kept the floor tape dispenser. Word traveled quickly. By afternoon, supervisors who had barely acknowledged him were asking for his opinion. The operations director was less pleased. He sent Claire a written complaint claiming Ethan was being allowed to operate outside his classification and warned that the company could create unmanageable expectations among hourly employees. Claire read it twice, then forwarded the warehouse results to corporate leadership with Ethan's name attached. That evening, she joined Ethan and Sophie at a neighborhood diner after Sophie's field trip. The girl pushed half her fries toward Claire without asking. Dad says you forget meals when you work. Ethan looked embarrassed. I said some people do. Claire smiled. He's not wrong. Sophie pulled a museum brochure from her backpack and showed them a bridge exhibit she had loved. Dad knew how all the support cables worked before the guide explained them. Claire looked at Ethan. Of course he did. For once he laughed. The sound surprised all 3 of them. The moment felt easy enough that Claire almost forgot the pressure waiting outside it. Then Sophie reached into her backpack for a pencil and accidentally pulled out an old folded document. Dad, this was in the drawer with my school papers. Ethan recognized it instantly. Claire saw the heading before he took it. Executive Operations Appointment. The date was 7 years earlier. Attached to it was a relocation package, a substantial salary increase, and a start date. Across the final page, Ethan had written one word in pen. Declined. Sophie looked confused. Was this the big job Grandma talks about? Ethan folded the papers carefully. It was an option. Why didn't you take it? He glanced at his daughter, then at the diner clock. Because options have costs. Before Claire could ask more, her phone rang. Corporate leadership wanted Ethan brought in the next morning, not for an interview, but to lead a 3-day emergency efficiency review across 2 facilities after his warehouse changes had already produced measurable savings. Claire covered the phone and looked at him. They're asking for you specifically. Ethan's first question was not about pay or title. What hours? Claire checked the message and felt the unease return. They haven't said yet. The 3-day review began at 7:30 the next morning, and Claire made sure Ethan saw the schedule before he agreed to anything. The final meeting ended at 3:30 each day. No surprise evenings, she said. Ethan read the page twice, then nodded. Then I can do it. At the first facility, managers expected a consultant-style presentation. Ethan asked for a safety vest instead. He walked receiving, storage, packing, and shipping with the floor supervisors, watching where people stopped, doubled back, or waited for equipment. By noon, he had found the source of a recurring overtime problem. 2 departments were scheduling critical equipment inspections during the same 30-minute window, forcing one crew to stand idle while the other rushed. He staggered the inspections, reassigned one backup unit, and asked the supervisors to test the change before changing anything permanently. By the end of the shift, the backlog was gone. Nobody stayed late. On day 2, a damaged dock restraint threatened to close an entire loading lane during a high-volume afternoon. The facility's contractor recommended shutting down the bay until replacement parts arrived. Ethan examined the mechanism and noticed the failure was in a replaceable sensor bracket, not the restraint itself. He found a compatible bracket in inventory, had the repair documented, and kept the lane operating safely. The facility manager looked at Claire afterward. How is this man changing light fixtures? Ethan heard the question but kept filling out the maintenance record. By the final review, corporate leadership had measurable results from both sites. Reduced overtime, fewer damaged loads, shorter truck waits, and no increase in injuries or staffing. Claire presented the numbers with Ethan's name on every recommendation he had actually made. Her operations director objected. We're building a management case around someone who refuses flexibility. Ethan sat quietly until Claire asked him to respond. I'm flexible about work, he said. I'm not flexible about promises. That evening, Sophie was waiting beside his pickup with a grocery bag and a folded paper crown from school. You're famous now? She asked. Ethan smiled. No. Mrs. Perez said people at your job are finally figuring out you're smart. Mrs. Perez talks too much. Sophie handed him the crown. You still came home. He placed it carefully on the dashboard. Claire watched from a few steps away and understood something that had bothered her since seeing the old executive appointment. Ethan had not declined responsibility. He had chosen a version of responsibility that did not require Sophie to compete with it. The next morning, corporate leadership offered him the newly created Regional Process Improvement Manager position. The salary was nearly double his maintenance pay. He would supervise cross-facility efficiency projects, train managers, and report directly to operations leadership. Claire slid the offer across the conference table. Standard hours are 7 to 4. Ethan looked at Sophie's school pickup reminder written inside his notebook. Travel. Limited. Scheduled in advance. Evenings. Only by agreement. He looked at Claire. You checked. I did. For the first time, relief crossed his face before he hid it behind a small smile. Then yes, I'll take it. By Friday, Sophie had taped the offer letter to their refrigerator beside her Science Night certificate. Ethan still drove the same worn pickup. He still left on time. But now supervisors who once barely noticed him were asking for his judgment before problems became emergencies. It felt, for a moment, like recognition had finally found the right shape. Then Claire received a revised executive staffing memo marked confidential. The new position had been reassigned to a regional restructuring initiative beginning the following month. Required travel, 3 nights per week. Mandatory availability, evenings during rollout. At the bottom was one final line. Refusal of revised duties may result in withdrawal of the promotion. Claire brought the revised memo to Ethan before his first day in the new role. He read the travel requirements once, then again more slowly. 3 nights every week? During restructuring, she said. Maybe longer. Ethan looked at the original offer letter clipped inside his notebook. That wasn't the job I accepted. I know. Can it be changed? Claire hesitated. I'm trying. That hesitation told him enough. By noon, the operations director called Ethan into a conference room and spoke as if the matter were already settled. Regional leadership requires flexibility. This position exists because the company needs someone available when problems happen. Ethan remained calm. The offer said scheduled travel and agreed evenings. Business needs change. So do agreements? The director leaned back. This is exactly what I warned Claire about. You want management authority without management sacrifice. Ethan did not argue. He simply asked for the revised terms in writing. That afternoon, Sophie texted him a photo of the paper crown still sitting on his pickup dashboard. Under it she wrote, "First real day. Proud of you." Ethan stared at the message for several seconds before putting the phone away. Claire spent the rest of the day pressing leadership to honor the original offer. The response came back coldly. Accept the restructuring assignment or return to his former maintenance classification. Her operations director added a formal note questioning Ethan's long-term executive readiness because of his unwillingness to meet changing demands. Claire hated the language, but she also knew a company could not run every leadership position around one person's family schedule. For the first time, what she had learned from Ethan collided directly with the responsibilities she carried herself. At 4, Ethan found Sophie waiting near the employee entrance with her backpack and a grocery store coupon booklet. "Did you get the new office?" she asked. "Not exactly. Do you still get home?" Ethan smiled faintly. "That part I'm working on." The next morning, he met Claire in her office and placed the promotion badge on her desk. "I'm declining the revised job. If you do that, they'll send you back to maintenance. Then that's where I go." "Ethan, you earned this." "I earned the job they offered. This is a different one." Claire looked at him. "You could try it for a few months." He was quiet for a long moment. "I tried that once." The words shifted the room. "The executive job from 7 years ago?" Claire asked. Ethan nodded. "I didn't decline it immediately." That answered part of the mystery. He had not always known how to choose. "What happened?" "I learned late." Before Claire could ask more, the operations director entered with the official reclassification form already prepared. Ethan signed it without protest. By Friday, his name had been removed from the management roster, his salary increase canceled, and the new office assigned elsewhere. Supervisors who had spent the week asking for his judgment suddenly stopped meeting his eyes. Claire watched him return to the same maintenance cart he had pushed before anyone knew his history. Sophie came by after school and found the promotion letter still taped to their refrigerator at home. She took it down carefully that evening. "Should I throw it away?" Ethan shook his head. "No. We don't throw away things just because they hurt." Sophie folded it and placed it inside her Science Night folder. A smaller paper slipped out with it, an old emergency room discharge sheet bearing her name and a date 7 years earlier, the exact week Ethan had walked away from the executive job. Sophie looked at Claire, who had stopped by with updated paperwork. "This is why Dad came home," she said quietly. And suddenly the loss in front of them pointed directly toward the truth Ethan had spent years refusing to explain. By Monday morning, Ethan was back in the maintenance shop, wearing the same faded work jacket and checking a repair list nobody had bothered to update over the weekend. His promotion was gone, his salary had returned to what it had been before, and 2 managers who had once asked for his advice now walked past without stopping. Claire arrived carrying Sophie's old emergency room discharge sheet and the executive appointment Ethan had declined 7 years earlier. "I need to understand this," she said. Ethan looked at the date, then at Sophie's name. She was 8. Claire waited. "I had taken the promotion," he said quietly. "Travel, late nights, everything they asked for. I kept telling myself it was temporary." During his 3rd week, Sophie developed a severe allergic reaction at an after-school program. The staff could not reach Ethan for nearly an hour because he was leading an overnight regional rollout 2 states away. His mother reached the hospital first. Ethan arrived the next morning. Sophie recovered, but he never forgot walking into that hospital room after everyone else had already been there for her. "So you quit?" Claire asked. "I stepped back. Then I kept stepping back until I could be where she needed me." Claire finally understood the old badge, the declined appointment, the 4 o'clock departures, and why Ethan never argued when people called him unambitious. He had already lived the version of success they kept trying to sell him. Before she could say more, alarms sounded from the main warehouse. A routing failure had sent multiple automated carts into the same loading corridor, blocking emergency access and freezing outbound shipments. The operations director was already ordering the system rebooted. Ethan looked at the monitor. "Don't reboot yet. Your maintenance," the director snapped. "And the carts are locked into active routes," Ethan replied. Rebooting without clearing priority assignments could restart them in the same conflict. Claire stepped between them. "Let him finish." Ethan pulled the routing history, found that the new restructuring software had merged 2 facility maps without updating restricted lanes, then manually isolated the affected zone. He directed supervisors to clear carts in sequence, reopened emergency access first, and restored shipping lane by lane. Within 40 minutes, the warehouse was moving again. No equipment was damaged. No workers were put at risk. Claire requested the system audit immediately. The logs showed the routing conflict came from the same restructuring plan that had absorbed Ethan's new position and expanded its travel requirements. His judgment had prevented the exact kind of failure the plan was supposed to solve. At the executive review that afternoon, Claire presented the audit, the warehouse recovery report, Ethan's earlier efficiency results, and the original terms of his promotion. "We changed the job after he accepted it," she said. "Then we called him inflexible when he refused terms he never agreed to." The operations director tried to frame Ethan's priorities as a leadership limitation. Sophie, waiting quietly near the back because Claire had brought her from school, looked at him and said, "My dad already tried choosing work first once. I was the one who paid for it." The room went still. Ethan did not add anything. He did not need to. The regional leadership team reviewed the evidence, removed the restructuring duties from his position, restored the original schedule, and cleared the negative readiness note from his file. One executive finally looked across the table at him. "Mr. Cole, we mistook your boundaries for weakness." Ethan folded his hands calmly. Around the room, no one had an answer for that. And for the first time, the silence belonged to the people who had misunderstood him. For a moment after the meeting ended, nobody rushed Ethan. The operations director gathered his papers without looking at him, while 2 senior managers who had once treated him like background now waited for him to finish speaking with regional leadership. Ethan did not enjoy their discomfort. He simply asked for the restored position in writing. "Same hours, same travel limits, same agreement," he said. The regional director nodded. "Exactly as originally offered." Ethan glanced at Claire. "Then I'll consider it tonight." He would not accept because the room felt guilty. He would accept only if the job still allowed him to be Sophie's. Father first. The next morning, after reading every page at their kitchen table, Ethan signed. The Regional Process Improvement Manager title became official, but he kept his old maintenance badge in the glove box of his pickup. "Why keep that?" Sophie asked. "Reminds me titles change faster than people do." The operations director remained with the company, but authority over Ethan's position was removed from him while leadership reviewed how the restructuring had been handled. Ethan asked for no punishment beyond that. "He should answer for his decisions," he told Claire. "I don't need him humiliated." Claire's repair went further than an apology. She ordered every newly created management role to include written travel and after-hours expectations before anyone accepted it. She also required schedule changes to be reviewed with the employee instead of being imposed after promotion. Ethan noticed the policy during his first leadership meeting. He said nothing until afterward. "You changed the system. It needed changing. Because of me?" Claire shook her head. "Because you made me see what it was costing people. That mattered to him. So did what did not change." At 4 o'clock, Ethan still left when his work was finished. He still stopped at the grocery store when Sophie texted that they were out of milk. He still helped Mrs. Perez with things she insisted would only take 5 minutes. And on Thursday afternoons, his battered pickup still sat outside Sophie's school before dismissal. The difference was that nobody called those choices a lack of ambition anymore. His new job suited the same skills Claire had first seen on that blocked highway. He walked facilities, listened before speaking, fixed systems instead of blaming people, and taught managers to notice where work actually broke down. Within months, overtime fell at several sites and safety complaints improved. His results made the recognition official. His boundaries made it sustainable. Claire changed too, though less visibly. She stopped treating every late-night email like an emergency. She began leaving her office before the cleaning crew arrived. Some evenings, she joined Ethan and Sophie at the diner where that first ride had paused. Sophie always ordered pie before dinner and claimed adulthood would eventually prove her right. One Friday, Claire arrived just as Ethan was paying the check. "My driver canceled," she said. Sophie looked at her father, then toward the old pickup outside. "Well, we know somebody who gives rides." Ethan smiled. "Depends where she's going." Claire met his eyes. Home. Nobody defined the word. They did not need to. The relationship between them had grown carefully, through repaired mistakes, earned trust, shared meals, and ordinary afternoons when no one needed rescuing. A few weeks later, Ethan pulled into the school pickup lane at 3:55. Sophie climbed into the passenger side, tossed her backpack between the seats, and noticed Claire sitting beside him. "Hey," Sophie said, pointing at the bag. That's where she sat the first time. Claire looked down at the same worn backpack that had separated them during that strange ride months earlier. Ethan reached over and moved it gently onto the back seat. Sophie grinned. "Guess we don't need it in the middle anymore." Claire laughed softly. Ethan started the truck. The cracked dashboard rattled, the engine complained, and the three of them pulled away from the school together. One ride had once taken a billionaire CEO home because her car had failed. What changed her life was discovering that quiet strength, kept promises, and a good father could show her what home was supposed to mean.